So I, like the vast majority of people who don't regularly read comic books, was introduced to the existence of Moon Knight as a character via the miniseries starring Oscar Isaac, one of the best actors in all of Hollywood. It is one of my favorite things to exist in ever for forever. Immaculate, phenomenal, superb, other positive adjectives. However, now that I've found my new favorite superhero, I realized the reason I never knew Moon Knight existed was because Moon Knight never got a children's cartoon. No video-based entertainment outside of whatever appeared on Nickelodeon or the Disney Channel existed to me until about the 7th or 8th grade, you see? And then, the first friends I made in middle school were in the anime club, so that's the niche I zeroed in on for the next few years. And since nobody else is liable to have this idea, I figured, why not? Why not invent a concept for the Moon Knight children's cartoon myself? What would an after-school Moon Knight cartoon look like? That's the video. The next approximately 20 minutes are going to be me pitching my hypothetical Moon Knight cartoon. I wish to begin my exploration not with Moon Knight, but with the after-school cartoon itself. Now, after-school and Saturday morning cartoons are siblings. The Saturday morning cartoon has an air of wanton revelry. School is not in session today, and we will spend the time we would be languishing through the teacher's opening greetings in the heightened reality of animation. We are microdosing on summer this day. We are free, and our imaginations shall run wild! On the other hand, the after-school cartoon has more of an air of daydreaming distraction. The after-school cartoon is what one saves to the DVR to make sure they don't miss new episodes if they have homework or extracurriculars or detention. These are less sugary in quality somehow. They are things that get you through your tough weeks. Think of it like the difference between a birthday party and a casual, intimate get-together. And I am all for casual, intimate get-togethers. The after-school cartoon comes in varying flavors, depending on which stage of schooling it is meant to accompany. I will choose to aim this hypothetical cartoon at the middle schooler demographic, as I think they deserve to go beautifully feral over Moon Knight specifically. By God, I will give the children AMV materials as if my life depended on it. With these things out of the way, all I must do now is deeply familiarize myself with the Moon Knight canon, a task I am more than stoked for. I went into this journey believing MCU Moon Knight would remain my favorite iteration, and oh, I have never been happier to be wrong in my life. The ongoing series of Moon Knight comics written by Jed MacKay is unbelievably good, and if you read no other Moon Knight stories, read Midnight Mission. However, reading through it and a smattering of other Moon Knight comics, I quickly realized just why nobody had so much as thought to include Moon Knight in a cartoon for children beyond 2 deep-cut guest appearances in 2 completely different Spider-Man shows. Aside from, we can't let the children know crazy people exist. See, the vast majority of Moon Knight plot points and thematic elements are unbelievably difficult to make both appropriate and, more importantly, relatable for children in a way Spider-Man has never been. And that's just the runs I like. You have no idea how obnoxiously written certain Moon Knight runs are. Contrast with everyone's favorite red, white, and blue boy. There's a reason previously sickly all-American Boy Scout becomes super soldier to serve his country and punch Nazis is seen as a good fun time to show third graders, but dude incredibly competent at violence spends significant chunks of his adolescence in a mental hospital and goes on to be dishonorably discharged from the Marines for being mentally unstable, then goes on to become a ruthless mercenary for hire, then gets resurrected by and goes on to serve a moon god? Is not. This mystical reason is Moon Knight is too complicated and edgy to be anything resembling a good role model, and any competent parent would see their elementary schooler beginning to mimic Mark Spector's behavior and go, okay, we are not watching this show anymore, and the network is getting a strongly worded letter. Aside from things appropriate for children to be consuming before their mental faculties have reached the point where their critical thinking goes beyond, I like it, therefore it has no flaws. That backstory is too many steps and too removed from the context of a child's life for a kid to really get a grip on and connect to the character. Beyond the base premise of Mark Spector and company, the violence in Moon Knight is not cartoonish, the trauma is not clean, the ever-growing religiosity elements 1000% would go over the heads of most 12-year-olds, and in the Jed MacKay run, which I will be unabashedly pulling the most from in my pitch, redemption is such a heavy thematic focus, every other theme and element must answer to it. And when I say redemption, I do not mean Steven Universe redemption, where the focus is upon how to forgive others and yourself when something hurtful has been done. I'm talking Moon Knight gives a haunted house that kills people a purpose by making it a haunted home that still kills people. Redemption. Your Honor, Mark Spector did kill every single one of those people and later nearly took over the world in the name of Khonshu, who himself was being metaphysically maddened, leading to the Avengers mandating Mark have regular therapy sessions because of it. Redemption. One of Moon Knight's little assistants in the current run is a former Hydra goon, and if Hydra aren't superhero world stand-ins for Nazis, they're still certainly a hate group. Redemption. I love Jed MacKay's writing, but that's such a can of worms to translate into a new context. Jeff Lemire's writing was the version I believe the TV miniseries drew the most from, and that one centers such profound gaslighting, manipulation, betrayal, and raw trauma that I am questioning if this reimagining is possible. But it must be, because if Centaur World can have a TV Y7 rating it absolutely should not have, and Gravity Falls can squeeze in Ancient Sins, then I refuse to believe I can't make the concepts behind Moon Knight into an interesting cartoon for middle schoolers, damn it! So, what do we do to transform Moon Knight into this new genre? Our most glaring and consequential bridge to cross is the navigation of Moon Knight's DID and how exploring it presents an inherent challenge to the tone. In the live-action miniseries, we see the harrowing experience of Mark and Steven coming to terms with their shared pasts and one another and accepting that they are inextricable and need and love each other. This endpoint is wonderful and lovely, but if the audience is directly shown specific traumas in Mark Spector's past, which create the conditions for the Moon Knight system to exist as they exist, the tone cannot be fully reeled back. Contrastingly, in the Jeff Lemire run of the comics, we see Mark go through and do some absolutely ghoulish and awful things, and both the audience and the character are not 100% sure what to make of his experience of reality moment to moment the majority of the story. We cannot have that. Too heavy and too high concept for a fun after-school cartoon. It is not the genre. So, what we're gonna do is we're gonna perform a fun little magic trick with the framing of how Moon Knight is. This Moon Knight cartoon will feature Mark, Jake, and Steven already knowing each other and already being a functional system whose past is mostly a mystery to the audience and stays that way. We do not learn the traumas. We do not dwell on the stints in mental institutions beyond brief one-liners about not finishing high school and disparaging Jell-O. Moon Knight is an adult with a job and also a heroic mission. That's what our main character's life is about right now, so that's what we see. It'll be a good source of evergreen wonder for speculation and awe within the viewers. I wish to fill the audience with a sense of intrigue and closeness to Moon Knight via very occasional and vague looks into a messier time in his life. To exercise the necessary broadcast-appropriate restraint, not by making it less messy, but by viewing the trauma and messiness from a point of comparative security after the bulk of the storm has passed. Their history and their condition is a permanent thing the three of them are living and growing with together, but managing the tone and delivering the audience through the story more gently than the source material does must be kept in mind, because that is the social contract of the genre I've chosen. As for how Mark, Jake, and Steven are to be handled as a character unit, I'm leaning away from the miniseries, but still swiping a few of the ideas from there. Example, Steven being initially based off of a character from a movie that was very formative for Mark. I thought that was a great detail, I'm stealing it. The idea that Jake is particularly hard to crack the dissociative wall between is also fun to play with to me. I think it would be fun if most of the notes left around their place are written in his handwriting, and if he is ever entirely alone on a mission, there is an added challenge where he has to use little strategies to make sure the information isn't lost to the gap between what's happening with him and what the other two are actively aware of when they start fronting again. I want the navigation of the dissociative disorder and also the little quirks and idiosyncrasies it introduces into Moon Knight's life to be an active feature and not a bug. It'll be a good experience for the 13-year-olds to be given an alternative way of functioning in the world, like how it's important for the brain development of toddlers to experience a variety and contrast of colors and textures. Next on the docket, we all know the grander populace had no idea Moon Knight existed before Oscar Isaac agreed to play him, don't kid yourself, so let me introduce you to some of my most beloved elements of the Moon Knight canon, which I will be incorporating lovingly into my hypothetical superhero show that doesn't exist. First element! You recall the haunted house Moon Knight turned into a haunted home I mentioned? Yeah, that's a vaguely sentient, extra-dimensional entity called the House of Shadows that kept appearing in different locations across Marvel Comics and luring people into its spooky maze corridors, until it appeared in Moon Knight's neighborhood and attempted to assimilate him when he investigated. It then proceeded to throw him back up because his mental health at the time was so unbelievably abysmal, just one attempt to touch his mind and consume him made the House of Shadows scream. A feat no one has managed to accomplish before or since. Incapable of banishing it, but also incapable of leaving business unfinished, Mark returned to the house and gave it an ultimatum. I can either blow you and myself up to keep you from eating random people in my neighborhood, or I can give you what any house wants, and you can be my home. The house accepts, and he christens it the Midnight Mission. Three more loves of mine from the Midnight Mission run are Reese, Soldier, and Hunter's Moon! Phenomenal supporting cast members, I adore every single one of them. I commonly refer to Reese as Moon Knight's little vampire assistant. She works as Moon Knight's receptionist at the Midnight Mission, where people come to bring their problems to Moon Knight. She's also one of the first people who walks into his life and chooses to stay there after the incident. The one the Avengers mandated he have regular therapy sessions over that also kind of destroyed most of his existing relationships, partially because he saved her after her own incident, being turned into a vampire against her will, but also just because she thinks he does good work and likes to help her neighborhood. She is a phenomenal normal person touchstone to all of the dramatic nonsense that follows Moon Knight, which is a little funny because if a 19-year-old former vegan turned vampire by a supernatural multi-level marketing scheme is the closest thing to a normal associate Moon Knight has, that sure does say a lot about the kind of life this man leads. She is also very cool and brave and thoughtful, and I like her lots. Soldier is the aforementioned former Hydra goon, and I adore him. He is so ride or die. He's some vague few years older than Reese, got introduced asking for help for his mom, and after multiple plot shenanigans I refuse to spoil, he just up and joins the Midnight Mission and says to Moon Knight, "I'm your guy for life." He's such a good character because this new life he's built for himself and the distance he's put between himself and Hydra has provided him with a clarity about his nature and his strengths and weaknesses that's lovely to see slotting against all the other characters. His dynamic with Reese in particular is wonderful to me. In one issue, Reese sees that being sucked into Hydra at an impressionable age created a gap in life experiences for him and takes him clubbing with her and her friends, and it is so cute seeing him very slowly loosening up and learning to dance in these panels. He's great. I love Soldier. Hunter's Moon is a surprise second fist of Khonshu, which nobody else in the decades of these comics seems to have thought to do. My guy says it himself. If a man has two fists, why should one ever assume a god has only one? Hunter's Moon's civilian name is Dr. Yaya Badur, and he is my favorite. I will never not adore whenever he is in a panel. He is introduced deciding Moon Knight has strayed from the path, both because of the incident and plot consequences, but more pertinently, because Moon Knight has decided to associate himself with vampires, which is a highest sacrilege in his eyes. They get into fights about it for about an issue and a half, but once they've worked the whole situation out, and Hunter's Moon comes to terms with how he was definitely being oversensitive about Reese for personal reasons, they fall right into comfortably calling one another brother, and everyone at the mission knows to go to him for help when Moon Knight, for one reason or another, is in over his head. Hunter's Moon, despite not at all agreeing with Moon Knight's modus operandi, backs him up and breaks his fall with unwavering devotion to their shared divine mission and an ever-growing love for his brother. Further back in Moon Knight's existence than just my favorite one of the comics, Moon Knight has a long history with the Werewolf by Night. In fact, Mark Spector as a character only began existing to be a guy that hunts werewolves for money. No moon god or dissociative disorder in sight. Moon Knight has a fraught relationship with Jack Russell the Werewolf by Night, involving multiple attempts on one another's lives, pierced by this deep understanding that both of them are just dealing with so much, and I think that would be a very fun relationship to include. They do not trust each other implicitly, even a little, but they will always hear one another out first and go for the throat second. The edgy ship-loving 6th graders will absolutely eat it up, and it is absolutely never getting confirmed in canon. On top of this, of course, it's Jean-Paul Frenchy Duchamp, Moon Knight's oldest and dearest wisecracking mercenary pilot BFF, who's been a character connected to him for almost as long as the Werewolf by Night. He's known Mark Spector for longer than anyone else in his contacts, and has been by his side as his stalwart, reliable getaway driver for decades. I love their relationship. I really like Frenchie's energy. I want him included, and also, he is very useful for the concept I have for the show. Speaking of which, I get to tell you all about what I'm doing with the show setting and plot! Our dear show would follow the tried and true structure of Problem of the Week with incremental seasonal plot progression, and the majority of the episodes start and end within the Midnight Mission. The things in place before the premiere are: Moon Knight is working out of the Midnight Mission in a problems-filled neighborhood of an undefined residential metropolitan area, with Reese, who is currently still a senior in high school, as his vampiric receptionist. We'll say she got held back a year back in middle school, and that's why she's 19. The audience is dropped into the story when Hunter's Moon enters Moon Knight's life, and the premiere centers around Moon Knight, Hunter's Moon, and Reese, all figuring out how they want to begin tackling the problems caused by the growing vampire presence in the city. A good chunk of said premiere is also dedicated dedicated to Hunter's Moon not trusting Reese even a little, and getting into fights with Moon Knight about his questionable judgment, possibly at one point accusing Reese of lying about being 19 on account of vampires or undead, and could be any age, at any appearance. This does not go over well with Moon Knight. Part of the climax is Moon Knight trusting Reese with a thing without question, and Hunter's Moon seeing how cool and brave she is and reevaluating his hangups about her. The episode ends with a very sincere apology from the good doctor, and officially establishing the relationship network between our 3 soon-to-be 4 primary cast members. In the same way Gravity Falls never wanted normal, straightforward monsters for their Monster of the Week, we never want normal, straightforward criminals, or easily explainable issues for our problems of the week. Stealing my example directly from Jed MacKay, we never want normal vampires, we want pyramid scheme vampires. We don't want mobsters, we want lich mobsters with hypnosis zombie goons. Evil loan sharks that turn out to be sirens, poachers that are also werewolves, ghost landlords, frankenpet infestations. The thing about Moon Knight dealing with creatures of the night is that he ends up fighting a lot of Halloween monsters. Never mummies, though. Very important. Each season would have the main villain be connected to someone of the main cast to help explore them. So, for instance, the pyramid scheme vampires handily named The Structure are obviously connected to Reese on account of the whole turning her into a vampire against her will. They and their mysterious shadow leader will make for an excellent season-long recurring bad guy throughout the first season. Not to mention, those plot points relating to Soldier that I refused to spoil tie in very nicely as a finale set piece for a Reese-centric season if we shuffle it just right. He'll be introduced partway through the season, and Reese at first is very intimidated by this man who is nearly twice her size, has a habit of lurking kind of menacingly, and whom her mom has always been suspicious of, but she does gradually warm up to him. There can be some fun drama around when and how the Hydra stuff becomes known, and by the end of the season, Soldier is officially a ride-or-die member of the mission, and him and Reese are friends, and it's nice. I have this distinct idea of Reese in the show as someone who wants to be pragmatic and optimistic about the whole unwilling creature of the night thing, and does that to the best of her ability, but not being able to go out in the sun anymore, and dealing with the fun new social stigma that being a vampire comes with, and having the extra stressor of needing to ethically source the blood she needs to drink to, live. It's really taken a toll on my girl. This is part of why she's so dedicated to the mission. Moon Knight gave her this job in part because he wanted to help her with that change and give her something to anchor herself to. And late in the season, they have a heart-wrenching conversation about dealing with stuff that you don't want to be happening and adapting to things that are so scary. There could be a whole episode earlier on where the B-plot is Reese's mom marching down to the mission to be sure this mysterious man who encourages strangers to come to him with their problems and only comes and goes in the dark of the night isn't taking advantage of her baby girl. It'll be great. I also wanted to incorporate world travel elements into the show on account of Moon Knight being the protector of travelers of the night. Hence Frenchie coming in great handy. Definitely gotta have a train heist and a plane rescue episode somewhere in there. Balancing home episodes and away episodes might be an interesting challenge in the writer's room, but I think it'd be doable with enough trust and mind melding. Speaking of home, the mission is firmly located in undefined metropolitan residential area, and it'll be a touch more whimsical than the spooky, scary M.C. Escher non-Euclidean extra-dimensional labyrinth that it is in the comics. I'm thinking like if the warehouse in Imagination Movers was an unknowable gothic creature who is friendly but difficult to manage and bites sometimes. Like a Chow Chow, or my partner. On one end of the block, there's the Midnight Mission, and on the other, Gina's Diner. This is another location from the comics, though it is absent in the Jed MacKay run for aforementioned plot consequences reasons. It'd be a nice place to visit every few episodes, and Gina's a very nice character. I like her. The grander neighborhood in general is populated by different apartment complexes, usually on top of little storefronts and dives and the like, and overall, it's a mostly normal neighborhood with a disproportionate quantity of spooky problems. The only rooms in the mission that are always the same place and the same size are the reception area and Moon Knight's office, where he gestures for petitioners to sit and asks, "How can I help you?" Nowhere else is consistent or stationary, and the amount of chairs and general color scheme and decor of those two static rooms aren't even consistent. Having different looks for the reception area and petitioner room based on the vibes for the episode and what the characters are feeling sounds like such a fun time, but it also sounds like a bit of a nightmare for the art director. We need to be very deliberate about what is and is not allowed to change and how much. For away episodes, there's actually an old-timey pneumatic tube system that letters will sometimes come in on with locations around the world written down inside of their very fancy envelopes, which Moon Knight is expected to go to. Sometimes they'll even have clues as to what he's being sent for. And as Moon Knight gets closer with the others at the mission, the letters start to have little notes at the bottom, saying to bring a particular character or two along. These letters are, of course, from Khonshu, and Hunter's Moon is less jealous and more bewildered that Khonshu would feel the need to communicate via cryptic letters to Moon Knight when he knows Khonshu can just appear wherever he sees fit. Moon Knight always brushes him off with memory issues, and that's usually the end of the conversation. The real reason is their relationship is too testy and complex for Khonshu to just appear to Moon Knight regularly. There's some soft magic thing about the emotional distance between them, manifesting in Khonshu having to send Mark on missions via letter, but being able to appear to Dr. Badur with ease. It's also a good fun setup for if we ever want to throw the audience for a loop and have other things come through the tubes, or have letters from other mysterious entities appear. Not from the mission, though. It is very important that the mission never communicate in words. I can't articulate why, but it's simply correct that that be the case. The most easily translatable the mission ever gets is arrows painted on the walls pointing people in directions. As an ongoing show where each season has the arc villain connect back to a specific protagonist, the final season must then end on a Moon Knight-centric story villain. And a perfect candidate already exists in the comics canon. Except Sun King is introduced in a run that is exactly the thing I was talking about when I mentioned how obnoxiously written some of the Moon Knight runs can get. I got maybe 2 issues in before deciding putting myself through this was not worth my limited time on this earth, and gave up on the whole thing, which is a real shame because the art is some of my favorite art I've seen in the Moon Knight comics. Like, I don't want to engage in any slander or anything, but every single sentence tested my patience, and I am uniquely patient with other people's art. However, the concept of a sun-themed Moon Knight villain connected to Amon-Ra with their own highly stigmatized mental health stuff going on is so compelling, it's too good not to use. So, what I'm saying is I forced myself to at least skim through the run in order to find the usable pieces of this character and plot that don't make me want to tear my skin off. While I assure you the aspects of the writing that filled me with a horrible, irritated, icky feeling did not go away, I will admit, zoomed out, in context, the story and character ideas and the concepts behind the emotional arcs are solid. I never want to see anything like this again. Within my complete overhaul of Sun King, I thought it would be real cool if I Magnus Archive-style seeded episodes gesturing at his existence all the way through the preceding seasons, until he comes crashing into the main plot in the final season as the primary antagonist. The world travel bit comes in handy for this, as it means I can have crimes and things in multiple different areas and different times where mysterious arson and or this man with an odd way of speaking are involved. And the particularly entrenched audience members can start red string connecting together. This is the same guy here in this episode as multiple episodes later, and for some reason, fires are things that keep happening, and if we look up the comics lore, then I'll have him center the plot when he enters Moon Knight's territory. My blatantly off-script reinterpretation of this character means he's going to be formally introduced to the audience in Gina's Diner as a homeless drifter named Ray, as opposed to as a literally nameless patient in a mental institution which he burns down by the end of the issue to show the audience how dangerous and unpredictable and unwell he is at the start of the story. He's not well in my little Moon Knight after-school cartoon. Anyone walking up to his little booth he takes up can see that, but he certainly doesn't seem to be bothering anyone. That, and there's something about him that draws people's attention, something magnetic about him. He speaks so strangely, but he's just so nice to listen to while he speaks. He's intimidating, but not unapproachable. He's bright. And then he isn't. I like the idea that he burns down half the diner a few episodes into the season, in an incident slightly similar to the one in the comics, where the big mental hospital arson incident resulted from his realization he is an avatar and extension of Amon-Ra, that all the incidents throughout his life where some horrible thing happening to him and the person or people responsible were somehow consumed in flame while he was left unscathed, all that was his latent pyrokinesis kicking in as a reflexive act of incredibly aggressive retribution. He then proceeded to burn the hospital down on purpose to prove some kind of obnoxious point about seeing the face of God. I don't know, it was genuinely too annoying for me to properly digest. My guy Ray has this same revelation about himself, and it is unclear for many episodes how intentional or unintentional his burning down of Gina's Diner was. Also, importantly, nobody dies in this fire. Open casualties breaks the tone. Ray is fundamentally a character defined by extremes. He uses extreme actions and has extreme reactions. He's the image of a cackling supervillain one moment, and incongruously calm and conversational 5 minutes later as the fire hydrants are melting. The canonical thing going on with him in the comics is that he's bipolar. I know just enough about the categorization of mental health disorders to believe that in art, the exact diagnosis doesn't matter so long as the systems are not just they're crazy at the writer's convenience, and the audience can follow what areas the character struggles with, how much, and in what ways. I'm simply going to say that he has a mood disorder that affects how he behaves moment to moment, and, in particularly intense moments, results in psychotic symptoms. Remember, kids, anyone can hallucinate if they're sleep deprived enough. Some of us just also do it when we're not sleep deprived. I want the keyword for the Sun King season to be reconciliation. Not just reconciliation as in forgiveness, but as in squaring two otherwise incongruous things together. Making things make sense, getting things settled. Reconciliation. Moon Knight having to truly reconcile with Khonshu, Ray having to reconcile his entire life up to this point, the members of the mission having to reconcile their image of who Moon Knight is in light of all the different ways he's behaved and presented himself in the time they've known him, Moon Knight reconciling with Sun King, and Khonshu reconciling with Amon-Ra, just this big collective navigation of how to work out your emotions and get on the same page as one another and be alright. That is the note I want Moon Knight altogether to end on. Oh, wow. I can't believe it took me until the end of the video to tell you guys the name of the show! Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I am tired. I went overboard with this and actually made an entire pitch document for Moon Knight altogether, which I was initially gonna put behind the little paywalled section of my Ko-Fi, but I decided no. No, I think it's important I not do that. So, it's still there on Ko-Fi, just available for anybody to grab. And hey, while you're there, maybe you want to chuck me a few bucks, like insert name here, here, and here. People who are on screen that I am not going to be writing into the script because, once again, I am too tired. Thank you guys so much for the support. I do mean it. That's all from me. This script is long enough. Bye. Eat good snacks.